the protocol.
Let's speak to the Democratic Congressman Brendan Boyle, who sits on the powerful Ways and Means Committee within Congress. Congressman, good to have you with us on the programme again. Thank you for your time. The government says the protocol was designed to protect the Good Friday Agreement and it is now undermining it. And these are modest, reasonable amendments to save it. What would you say to that?
Well, what I would say is let's look and listen at what the people of Northern Ireland themselves have said. Just last month, they had an election for the Northern Ireland Assembly, and almost 60% of the vote went to those parties that are in favor of the protocol. So I hope that the current British government would listen to the voices in Northern Ireland who have made it clear that they do support the protocol.
But didn't we listen to the thoughts and voices of the minority when we formed the Good Friday Agreement?
Yes, that's correct. Right now, I would say that actually society in Northern Ireland, there is no majority. It's roughly a 40-40-20 society. If you're saying that in order to have the protocol, you need cross-community support, that just isn't the case. Frankly, if that were the argument, then Brexit shouldn't have taken place in Northern Ireland because there was a lack of cross-community support for that as well. In fact, there was a lack of majority support. About 57-58% of folks there voted against it. So, look, this protocol was negotiated by this same British government. They agreed to it. They passed it through their own parliament, an overwhelming majority, by the way, both in parliament as well as an overwhelming majority then won at the election the following month. So what I would just ask for my British friends is to please cease from these unilateral actions. This is a time in which we should be focused on Russia and Ukraine, and not in a time when we should be creating these divisions within the Western alliance.
There are lots of people who do make the point on this side that the UK government signed this agreement. They were happy to sign it only a couple of years ago. Now they're trying to change it. But we are where we are, and this is the politics of the situation. And the Good Friday Agreement requires the participation of all communities in Northern Ireland. And what the government is saying, whether people like it or not, the majority voted for Brexit, and the protocol is now undermining stability in part of the United Kingdom. Do you think, I guess there is a feeling within some parts in Northern Ireland and within the UK government that in America and in the European Union, they only take into consideration one side of the debate and they're not focusing on the threat that comes from unionism?
In response, I could forward and bring up any one of several quotes from Boris Johnson as well as other British government officials saying how the protocol, in fact, does not violate the Good Friday Agreement. The recent economic evidence shows actually Northern Ireland is doing quite well, which makes sense because it is able to have a benefit that I think many people in London and Scotland would love to have, and that is a foot within the EU single market and a foot within the UK market. Look, I take seriously the concerns of everyone in Northern Ireland, whether you identify as nationalist, unionist, or neither, whether you identify as Irish, British, neither, or both. The reality is this latest action today by the British government doesn't get us anywhere closer to setting up Stormont and resuming power sharing. It's actually a big step backwards.
But how do you get Stormont up and running if the DUP say we're not returning to power sharing until you ditch the protocol or elements of it?
15 years ago, the question might have been, how do we have power sharing when Ian Paisley's DUP had just won as the single biggest party and promised not to go into government with Sinn Féin? We could bring up previous examples over the last 25 years where it looked like power sharing was permanently closed only to resolve them. So I do believe that history will follow through again. It is important, though, that ultimately the people of Northern Ireland are listened to. The vast majority want a normal, functioning government, especially at this time in which all of us around the world are dealing with rising prices from inflation.
What about the EU's position on negotiations? Is their enforcement of the protocol and the strict application of it proportionate with the small amount of smuggling into the single market that might result?
That's probably one of the most disingenuous and confusing arguments that have been proposed. The reality is there's no one from the EU who's enforcing this agreement. It is UK officials themselves who are enforcing it. What I would say is if there are areas in which one could reasonably point to and say this enforcement is overly strict, that's not in the interest of anyone. I think Mr. Sefcovic has made quite clear, as he did as recently as his proposals for changes in October, that there are ways that we can ease the implementation. That just makes sense for everybody. And certainly no one in Washington or Dublin or Brussels would oppose that.
But you will have met the Northern Ireland Minister, Conor Burns, who I believe is coming over to see you again to show you the draft legislation. And he brought with him this enormous wad of red tape, all these papers that certain companies in Northern Ireland have to sign and have to send off in order to import or export within the UK. Do you recognise that that's pretty heavy-handed for people to trade within an internal market?
So, yeah, I am aware of the prop. And what I would say in response is if you can figure out a way to have Brexit and the hardest possible version of Brexit, yet at the same time not put a regulatory border on the island of Ireland or in the Irish Sea, I am all ears on what that solution would be. But once the UK not only decided to go down the Brexit route, but the hardest possible Brexit, that did limit choices.
On the visit of Conor Burns, what sort of reception is he going to get? What are you going to say to him? What would you say to him if the UK does indeed pass the legislation that it's set out?
Yeah, so first, I mean, I continue to speak with a number of British government officials, have over the last 6 years that we have been dealing with this saga ever since the Brexit vote. What I would say to him respectfully is much of what I've said before, that this is not helpful. The Northern Ireland Protocol has been agreed to. We should focus on implementation and making the agreement work. We should be talking about ways in which we can make the democratically expressed wishes of the voters in Northern Ireland last month actually be carried out in terms of getting the assembly up and running. And finally, what I would say, regardless of the merits of the Northern Ireland issue, put that aside for a second. This is an important moment in the transatlantic alliance. Right now, tens of thousands of people in Ukraine on European soil are being killed. And this is what we're now having to deal with. All of us in the West and Western capitals should be focused on the situation in Ukraine, and anything that distracts from that is a true tragedy.
And if the UK government was to breach international laws, you see it, would you be loath to sign an international agreement, a trade deal with the UK? You sit on the Ways and Means Committee, you would have to rubber stamp it.
I mean, I think that it's fairly common sense that if you have a potential trading partner and they literally the last agreement they signed, they breached shortly thereafter, that doesn't exactly inspire confidence in a trade deal moving forward.
Congressman Boyle, thank you very much indeed. Tom, react to that for us.
Well, he's absolutely right. I mean, there's a lot of nitty-gritty there, but fundamentally the point is that the vote for Brexit happened 6 years ago.